The scent of old paper and dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun was Elara Vance's truest comfort. Her domain, the Willow Creek Public Library, was a testament to the quiet power of stories. It was a place of high arched windows that overlooked a winding river, and shelves that groaned under the weight of 1,000 worlds. Elara, with her spectacles perched on her nose and a stray strand of chestnut hair perpetually escaping her neat bun, moved through it with the grace of someone utterly at home. Willow Creek was a town woven from gentle smiles and shared cups of tea. Nestled in a valley cradled by ancient rolling hills, it was the kind of place where everyone knew your name, and a good harvest was as exciting as a new book release. Elara loved it here. She'd grown up within its cozy embrace, and the library had always been her sanctuary, a place where she could both lose herself and find herself among the hushed whispers of turning pages. At 28, Elara's life was a series of comfortable, predictable rhythms. Mornings began with the aroma of freshly brewed Earl Grey and the daily newspaper. Work was a symphony of stamping dates, shelving returns, and helping patrons find their next great escape. Evenings were spent curled on her armchair, a well-loved novel in her hands, the soft glow of her reading lamp illuminating the words. It was a good life, full of small, quiet joys. Yet sometimes, when the last patron had departed, and the library was utterly silent save for the ticking of the grandfather clock, a tiny, unbidden whisper of longing would stir within her. A longing for a story not yet written, a melody not yet heard. One Tuesday, a particularly crisp autumn day, Elara was meticulously reshelving a cart of returned fiction. Her fingers brushed against the spine of a worn copy of Wuthering Heights, a perennial favorite. As she slid it into its rightful place, a small cream-colored slip of paper fluttered from between its pages, landing softly on the polished oak shelf. Elara paused, curious. Patrons sometimes left bookmarks, but this looked different. It was thick, artisanal paper, with a deckled edge. She picked it up. Written in elegant, unhurried script in a deep indigo ink were just 2 lines. Even the quietest souls hold the loudest skies within. A fellow wanderer. Elara's brow furrowed slightly. It wasn't a note for her, surely. Perhaps a forgotten message between friends? She looked around the empty aisle. No one was there. The library was still, save for the distant hum of the old heating system. She turned the paper over. Nothing else. A strange warmth spread through her chest. It was a beautiful sentiment, poetic and profound. She reread it, a small unconscious smile gracing her lips. K.A.A., fellow wanderer? Who could it be? It felt deeply personal, yet completely anonymous. She slipped the note into the pocket of her cardigan, a peculiar feeling of both wonder and mild bewilderment settling over her. The next morning, Elara found herself thinking about the note. It was so unlike anything she usually encountered. Willow Creek wasn't a town for grand romantic gestures or cryptic philosophical musings. It was a town for potlucks and bake sales. She dismissed it as a charming anomaly. However, 3 days later, as she was tidying the periodical section, a second note appeared. This time, it was tucked into the latest issue of Gardening Monthly, a publication she knew only one of her regular patrons, old Mrs. Gable, ever checked out. The paper was the same cream color, the ink the same indigo, the script equally beautiful. The world often misses the quiet strength of a steady hand, guiding stories to their homes. Still wondering. Elara's breath hitched. Guiding stories to their homes. This note felt undeniably directed at her. A flush crept up her neck, a mixture of embarrassment and a thrill she hadn't felt in a long time. Someone was watching her. Not in a creepy way, but observing, appreciating. She looked around again, a little more intently this time. The library was bustling with its usual Saturday morning crowd. Children animatedly choosing picture books, students hunched over textbooks, a few retirees browsing the large print section. Could it be Mr. Henderson, the retired English teacher who always had a twinkle in his eye? Or perhaps the new artist Liam, who had recently moved to town and spent hours sketching in the local park, often stopping by the library for inspiration. She dismissed both thoughts. Mr. Henderson was too direct, too boisterous. Liam seemed too shy to engage in such a subtle, almost clandestine act. She carefully folded the note and tucked it into the front pocket of her apron, her fingers lingering over the smooth paper. Throughout the day, she found herself glancing up from her work, scanning faces, trying to discern a hint of recognition, a knowing glance. But everyone seemed to be wrapped in their own worlds, as they always were. The notes continued to appear, each one a soft lyrical whisper that seemed to speak directly to Alara's soul. They were never left in obvious places, never addressed to her by name, and always signed with a variant of a wanderer. One Monday, she discovered a note pressed between the pages of The Secret Garden, a book she had loved as a child. It was resting on the returns cart, waiting to be reshelved. Some gardens bloom brightest when tended with quiet devotion, unseen but deeply felt. A witnessing wanderer. Alara held the note, her heart doing a strange little flutter. Quiet, devotion. It spoke to her very essence, her dedication to her work, her quiet life. No one had ever articulated her spirit quite like that. It wasn't a grand declaration, but a gentle acknowledgement, and it touched her more deeply than any overt compliment ever could. She began to anticipate their arrival, a small thrill of excitement bubbling up whenever she approached a stack of books or a freshly returned magazine. It was like a secret game, a hidden conversation between herself and an unknown admirer. She started paying closer attention to her surroundings, to the subtle nuances of her patrons, searching for any clue. She noticed a few things. The notes always appeared when she was alone in a section, or just after she had left it. They seemed to be placed with an almost ethereal timing, as if the sender knew her routine intimately, but was always just a step ahead, just out of sight. Her days, once comfortable in their predictability, now held a new kind of magic. The library, always a beloved place, felt even more enchanted. Every book, every aisle, every quiet corner held the potential for discovery. She found herself smiling more often, a soft, secret smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Her colleagues, Mrs. Peterson and young Ben, noticed her improved spirits. "You seem particularly cheerful, Alara," Mrs. Peterson commented one afternoon, as Alara hummed softly while organizing the new arrivals. "Did you finally finish that particularly dense Victorian novel?" Alara laughed, a little more brightly than usual. "Something like that, Mrs. P. Just enjoying the day." She couldn't tell them about the notes. It felt too personal, too precious to share. It was her secret, her whispers. The whispers continued, each one adding a new layer to the mystery, a new dimension to Alara's growing fascination. One particularly rainy afternoon, as the library was mostly empty, save for the rhythmic patter against the windows, Alara was dusting the antique globe in the children's section. Tucked into the small brass base of the globe, she found another note. "The world is vast, but sometimes the most beautiful discoveries are made in the quiet corners of familiar maps." Always wandering. Alara traced the elegant script with her fingertip. Familiar maps. The library was her familiar map, and these notes were indeed the most beautiful discoveries she had made within it. She felt a profound sense of gratitude towards this anonymous sender. They didn't just see her, they understood in her. They saw the quiet joy she found in her predictable routines, the comfort she derived from the familiar. She started collecting the notes, keeping them in a small, cedar box on her bedside table. Sometimes, before falling asleep, she would take them out and read them again, letting the words wash over her. Each note was a tiny, heartfelt poem, a gentle observation that resonated deeply within her. They made her feel seen, appreciated, and cherished in a way she hadn't realized she longed for. The longing that used to stir within her, that small, unbidden whisper of something more, was now being addressed, quietly and tenderly, by these very whispers. It wasn't a longing for grand adventures or dramatic romances, but for connection, for someone to truly see the quiet depths of her soul. One crisp morning, Alara was opening the library, the brass key cold in her hand. The silence of the empty building always held a special charm, a sense of anticipation before the day's stories began. As she walked past the front desk, her gaze fell upon a small, delicate sprig of dried lavender resting on the polished wood. Beneath it, a folded note. Her heart gave a little leap. This was new. A small gift, a token. She picked up the lavender, its delicate fragrance a soothing balm. Then she unfolded the note. Some scents, like some truths, need only a gentle breeze to be fully appreciated. May this quiet beauty bring you a moment of peace. A scent-seeking wanderer. Ilara held the lavender to her nose, inhaling its calming aroma. A moment of peace. That's exactly what these notes brought her. More than peace, they brought a sense of quiet magic, a feeling that her ordinary life was perhaps not so ordinary after all. She imagined the sender, carefully choosing the lavender, placing it with such tenderness. Who was this person? She found herself analyzing every interaction, every fleeting glance. Was it the shy young man who always read in the philosophy section? Or perhaps the elderly gentleman who checked out historical biographies and always offered a polite, if brief, conversation? Every possibility felt both right and wrong. The sender seemed to possess a delicate sensibility, a poetic soul, and a deep understanding of her quiet nature. One afternoon, as she was helping a young boy find a book on dragons, she felt a peculiar sensation, as if she were being watched. She glanced up, and across the vast expanse of the main reading room her eyes met those of a man she'd never seen before. He was tall, with kind eyes the color of moss after rain, and a gentle smile that seemed to crinkle at the corners. He held a book in his hand, a worn copy of Leaves of Grass. He offered her a small nod, a brief, almost imperceptible gesture, before turning his attention back to his book. Ilara felt a jolt. He was new, and he had a certain quiet grace about him. Could it be him? Her mind immediately started racing, connecting dots. The wanderer's signature, he was clearly new to Willow Creek. The poetic nature of the notes, Leaves of Grass was a book of profound poetry. The gentle, observing nature, he hadn't made a grand entrance, just a quiet presence. She found herself stealing glances at him throughout the remainder of the afternoon. He was engrossed in his reading, occasionally making a note in a small, leather-bound journal. He seemed utterly at peace in the library, as if he belonged there as much as she did. When he finally approached the circulation desk, Ilara's heart hammered a little faster than usual. "Just this one today, please," he said, his voice a soft baritone, as rich and comforting as the scent of old paper. His eyes, when they met hers, held a depth she found immediately captivating. "Of course," Ilara managed, her voice a little breathy. She took the book, her fingers brushing his as she did so. A spark, tiny yet undeniable, seemed to leap between them. "First time visiting Willow Creek?" she asked, attempting a casual tone, though her pulse was doing a frantic jig. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. "Yes, I'm settling in. It's a beautiful town. And this library, it's magnificent." "Thank you," Ilara said, feeling a blush creep up her neck. "We're very proud of it." She swiftly stamped the due date, her hands feeling clumsy. "Welcome to Willow Creek." "Thank you, Ilara," he said, and the way he spoke her name, gently, as if he'd known it for a long time, sent another shiver down her spine. He picked up his book. "I'm Elias Thorne, by the way." "It's lovely to meet you, Elias," she replied, meeting his gaze. There was a shared moment, a quiet understanding passing between them, before he turned and walked away, disappearing between the towering bookshelves. Ilara watched him go, a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions swirling within her. Elias Thorne, the new man in town. Poet die. Quiet. Observing. Could it be him? Could he be the wanderer? The next day, she found a note tucked into the spine of a book on local history she had been researching for a patron. It was the usual cream paper, indigo, ink. Some stories are whispered between the leaves of trees, others between the lines of old maps, but the most profound are often found in the quiet gaze of another. A newly settled wanderer. Ilara read the last line, her breath catching in her throat. Yea, a newly settled wanderer. It had to be Elias. The timing, the phrasing, the new emphasis on gaze. It all pointed to him. A profound sense of excitement, mingled with a touch of trepidation, settled over her. She looked around the library, a new awareness sharpening her senses. Every shadow, every rustle of a page, every quiet presence felt charged with possibility. The whispers had found a voice, or at least, a potential face. Her heart yearned to know for certain, to unravel this beautiful, tender mystery. As she closed the library for the evening, the setting sun casting long golden shadows across the polished floors, Alara clutched the latest note in her hand. The quiet longing she used to feel was gone, replaced by a vibrant, hopeful anticipation. The whispers had started a story, and she felt, with a certainty that hummed through her very being, that her own story was just beginning to unfold. She wondered what the next whisper would bring, and if, perhaps, it would finally come from Elias himself. She wondered what the next whisper would bring, and if, perhaps, it would finally come from Elias himself. The morning light, usually a gentle balm, felt charged with a new energy as Alara unlocked the library doors. The scent of old paper and beeswax polish, comforting and familiar, now mingled with a faint tremor of anticipation in her chest. She moved through the quiet aisles, her fingers tracing the spines of books, half expecting a new note to simply materialize. She checked the familiar spots, the poetry section, the worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, the children's literature corner, where she sometimes found little drawings left by curious young readers. Nothing. A pang of disappointment, sharp and unexpected, pierced through her hopeful mood. Had the whispers stopped? Had her nameless correspondent decided their game was over? She tried to dismiss the thought, telling herself that such magic couldn't last forever, that perhaps the mystery was meant to be fleeting. Yet the vibrant feeling from yesterday refused to dwindle. She settled into her routine, dusting shelves, organizing returns, helping a young scholar find a tome on ancient history. Her mind, however, kept drifting. She found herself subconsciously scanning faces in the village square visible from the library window, wondering if any of them harbored the secret of Elias. Was he the quiet man who always read the newspapers in the corner? The jovial baker who delivered fresh pastries? Or someone she hadn't even noticed? It was late afternoon when Alara finally allowed herself a break, retreating to her favorite armchair by the large bay window. She picked up a book she had long intended to reread, Eye-Wuthering Heights. The worn leather cover felt soft beneath her fingertips, a testament to countless journeys through its pages. She opened it to the first chapter, her eyes scanning the familiar opening lines about Heathcliff and his wild, untamed spirit. Suddenly, a small, folded piece of paper fluttered from between the pages of Chapter 5, landing softly on her lap. Her breath hitched. It wasn't just a note. It was Githy note. Her heart began to drum a frantic rhythm against her ribs. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the paper. The elegant script, so familiar yet still a mystery, greeted her. Gelara. I wonder if your heart, like mine, finds solace in the wild moorlands of Heathcliff and Catherine, or if you prefer a gentler love story. I've often seen you here, lost in the worlds within these covers, and I confess, I've wondered what stories resonate most deeply with your soul. Warren. Alara's cheeks flushed, a warmth spreading through her. He had seen her. He knew her habits, her silent companions. The direct address, her name written by his hand, sent a thrill through her. And the question, it wasn't just a whisper now. It was an invitation to a conversation. She looked around, her gaze darting through the quiet library. There was no one obvious. Just a few patrons lost in their own worlds. She clutched the note, the paper warm from her touch. A sudden impulse seized her. She couldn't simply keep this to herself. She had to respond. Carefully, she reached for a spare piece of cardstock from her desk drawer, finding a quill and ink pot. Her hand hovered, unsure how to begin. How did one reply to a ghost of words? She decided to be as honest and open as he had been. Yes. My heart finds solace in all stories, especially those that stir the soul. But gentleness, I confess, holds a particular charm. Perhaps a story where love is a quiet strength, like a river carving its path through stone, rather than a tempest that leaves devastation in its wake. Han, to answer your unspoken question. Yes, I have noticed you too, though I know not who you are. Your words have stirred a longing I didn't know I possessed. Why? Alara. When in law? She folded the note, her heart thumping. Now where to leave it? She couldn't simply leave it in Wuthering Heights. That would be too obvious. She thought about his words. I've often seen you here. He knew her patterns. She often left a bookmark in the book she was currently reading. A mischievous idea sparked. She placed her response carefully inside a different book, one she'd just put back on the shelf after a patron had returned it, a collection of Shakespeare's sonnets. A subtle nod to the enduring power of gentle, heartfelt words. She chose Sonnet 116, about love not altering when it alteration finds. She marked the page with a small pressed violet she kept in her desk, a memento from her grandmother's garden. She hoped he would find it. The next morning, Alara found herself checking the sonnets first. Her heart leaped when she saw the violet was gone. In its place, tucked into the same sonnet, was another note, this time accompanied by a small, perfectly rendered sketch of a single violet, its delicate petals open to the world. Yelara. Ka river, carving its path through stone, that is a beautiful image. And one I find myself drawn to as well. Perhaps it is because true strength often lies in quiet persistence. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and for the exquisite violet. Its quiet beauty speaks volumes. Meste. As for my identity, I confess a certain shyness. But I promise I am no ghost, merely a man who finds courage in the written word. And your words, Alara, are a beacon. Why? May I ask, what is your favorite season? I find myself particularly fond of autumn, when the world seems to pause in a riot of color before its winter slumber. Venye. Gai duarai. Venang. Alara felt a wave of relief wash over her. He wasn't playing games. He was genuinely shy, and his words were sincere. A beacon, he called her words. She smiled, a genuine radiant smile that made old Mr. Henderson, browsing the history section, pause and wonder at her sudden cheerfulness. Their silent conversation continued over the next few days. It became a thrilling ritual. Each morning, Alara would arrive, filled with a delicious tension, wondering where the next note would be hidden. Sometimes it was in a book she'd just finished cataloging, other times in a volume she had only briefly glanced at, suggesting he was watching her, even when she wasn't aware. She wrote back, her replies becoming more personal, more open. She described her love for spring, the burst of new life, the hopeful green that returned to the village trees. He replied with a poem about spring rain, copied in his elegant hand, remarking on the rejuvenating power of a gentle shower after a long winter. She talked about her dream of one day seeing the great libraries of the world. He spoke of a fascination with ancient maps and the stories they told of forgotten lands. Through their notes, Alara began to build a picture of Elias. He was clearly intelligent, well-read, and possessed a keen eye for beauty in the mundane. He had a dry, subtle wit that made her chuckle softly to herself. He was observant, noticing the small details of her days, the way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear when she was deep in thought, or the particular tea she drank mid-morning. He never directly said he was watching her, but his observations implied it, and rather than feeling unnerved, Alara felt a strange sense of comfort, of being seen and understood. One afternoon, a note appeared not in a book, but tucked beneath her tea mug on her desk. It was shorter, more immediate. Alara. Have you ever noticed the way the light catches the stained glass window in the old clock tower at precisely 3:30 p.m.? It paints the cobblestones with such vibrant hues. I find myself drawn to it sometimes. Kai dot. No. Alara glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 3:15 p.m. Her heart gave a little leap. This wasn't just a question, it was an invitation. A shared moment, even if still apart. She quickly finished her tea, tidied her desk, and put on her light cardigan. I'm just stepping out for a moment, Martha, she called to her assistant, who was diligently organizing new arrivals. Just to stretch my legs. Martha, a woman of perpetually rosy cheeks and an unwavering love for historical fiction, merely nodded, engrossed in a particularly thrilling passage. Alara walked out into the crisp afternoon air, the sun already beginning its slow descent. The village square was bustling with a scattering of late-afternoon shoppers. She walked towards the old clock tower, its ancient stones worn smooth by centuries of weather. She found a bench across the square, strategically placed so she could watch the clock tower and also discreetly scan the faces of passers-by. 3:25 p.m. 3:28 p.m. Her pulse quickened. She felt a tingling sensation, a heightened awareness of her surroundings. Every face seemed a potential Elias. Was he the man selling flowers? The woman walking a small terrier? No, the note said man. But which one? The clock tower chimed 3:30 p.m., its deep, resonant tone echoing across the square. And then, it happened. A shaft of golden sunlight, perfectly angled, pierced through the intricate stained glass window at the top of the tower. For a glorious moment, the gray cobblestones below were splashed with jewel-toned light, crimson, sapphire, emerald, and gold, shifting and dancing as the sun moved. It was breathtaking, a fleeting masterpiece painted by light itself. Elara gasped, a soft, involuntary sound. She felt a profound connection to the moment, and to the person who had pointed it out to her. She looked around, searching. Her eyes swept over the square, lingering on a figure sitting on a distant bench, half obscured by a large chestnut tree. He was wearing a dark coat, his head bowed slightly as if reading. He had dark hair, she thought, though she couldn't be sure. Just as she considered walking closer, he rose, gathered his things, and melted into the crowd, leaving her with only a vague impression. Had that been him? She couldn't tell. A mix of exhilaration and a familiar pang of longing filled her. She wanted to know. She wanted to see his face. But the shared moment, the beauty he had invited her to witness, was a gift in itself. Before returning to the library, Elara paused by the base of the clock tower. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a small, perfectly preserved fern frond she had found pressed within an old botanical text that morning. It was delicate, intricate, and perfectly green. She tucked it carefully into a small crevice in the stone base. A silent thank you, a small offering. The next morning, tucked into the first book she opened to shelve, a collection of nature essays, was another note from Elias. This time, it wasn't just words. Tucked inside the folded paper was a tiny, exquisite charcoal sketch of the clock tower, the stained glass window glowing with imagined colors, and at its base, a minuscule fern frond. Elara? You saw it, didn't you? The world feels a little brighter when shared. And thank you for the fern. It sits now on my desk, a quiet reminder of shared beauty. I confess, I was there too, watching the light dance, and perhaps, watching you. Your joy in the moment was a sight to behold. Yanan. You know this must seem strange, perhaps even foolish, to communicate through notes, to share these fleeting moments from a distance. But there's a certain magic in discovering a kindred spirit through words alone, isn't there? I hope you feel it too. I hope you trust that my intentions are nothing but sincere. Hey! G.Al. G. Elara's hand went to her chest, her heart swelling with emotion. He had been there. He had seen her. And he had understood her joy. His words, so vulnerable and honest, dispelled any lingering doubts she might have harbored. She didn't feel the magic. She didn't trust him. A profound sense of connection settled over her, deeper than any she had ever known. She felt truly seen, not just for her outward appearance, but for the quiet, bookish soul she was. Their correspondence deepened, becoming a lifeline of shared thoughts and feelings. They spoke of fears and hopes, of favorite memories and quiet ambitions. Elias shared a story of a childhood spent exploring ancient ruins, sparking a fascination within Elara she hadn't known she possessed. He revealed a talent for sketching, often leaving small, intricate drawings, a bird on a branch, a winding river, a half-moon peeking through clouds, that hinted at a sensitive soul and a keen appreciation for the natural world. Elara, in turn, opened up about her quiet life in the village, her dreams of expanding the library's collection, her fondness for the old tales her grandmother used to tell. She wrote about the satisfaction of finding the perfect book for someone, and the quiet joy of a rainy afternoon spent curled up with a novel. Each note was a piece of him, a thread woven into the tapestry of her understanding. She began to feel as though she knew him, truly knew the essence of him, even without seeing his face. He was kind, thoughtful, observant, and deeply respectful. He had a quiet strength, a gentle spirit that shone through his careful words. The anticipation of finding a new note became the highlight of her day. She would often find herself smiling for no apparent reason, a secret joy bubbling beneath the surface. Martha, her assistant, sometimes gave her curious glances. "You seem particularly cheerful these days, Elara," she'd remarked one morning. "Must be all that spring air." Elara had simply smiled, a private warmth spreading through her. One late afternoon, as the library was nearing closing time, Elara found her latest note tucked into a copy of The Secret Garden, a book she had often recommended to children and adults alike for its message of hope and renewal. This note was different. It was written on a slightly heavier paper, and her name, Jelarai, was written with a flourish that made her heart flutter. "Yelara, I've been thinking a great deal about your river carving its path through stone, and about the quiet strength of love. Our shared journey through these words has felt like that to me, a slow, gentle unfolding, revealing something precious and enduring. Why, you ever find yourself drawn to the quiet contemplation of The Secret Garden, Chapter 17? Perhaps you'll understand why I feel a longing to share more than just words. That chapter speaks of hidden places, of beauty discovered, and of friendships that blossom in unexpected ways. Kai will be in the garden adjacent to the library, near the old oak, tomorrow at noon. If you wish to join me, simply bring this book. If not, I'll understand. No explanations needed, no apologies. Just the quiet understanding that some paths are meant to be walked alone, and some, perhaps, together. And with the greatest hope, Kelius." When Elara's hands trembled as she read the note, her breath catching in her throat. Elias. He had signed his full name, a silent promise of his presence. Tomorrow. Noon. The garden. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a mix of exhilarating fear and overwhelming hope. This was it. The moment she had both longed for and subtly dreaded. What if he wasn't what she imagined? What if the connection they had forged through words couldn't translate to reality? A wave of vulnerability washed over her. She had built him up in her mind, a composite of kindness, wit, and profound understanding. What if the man standing under the oak tree didn't match the image? She closed the library, the setting sun casting long, golden shadows across the polished floors, just as it had the day she received the first whisper. But this time, the quiet longing was gone, replaced by a tumultuous storm of anticipation. She clutched the note, the heavy paper crinkling slightly in her grasp. She walked home slowly, the village sounds a distant hum. Her mind raced, replaying every note, every shared thought. She felt a profound connection to this man, a bond forged in shared stories and unspoken understanding. To retreat now would be to deny a part of herself, to extinguish the beacon he had called her words. No, go. She had to go. The risk of disappointment was great, but the promise of discovery, of finally putting a face to the voice that had so beautifully awakened her heart, was far greater. That night, Elara slept little, her dreams a kaleidoscope of words, oak trees, and sunlight. She chose her dress carefully the next morning, a simple, soft green, the color of new growth, of hope. She ate a light breakfast, her stomach a flutter of butterflies. At 1:45, she picked up The Secret Garden, its familiar weight a comfort in her trembling hands. She walked through the library, past Martha, who was engrossed in a particularly juicy historical romance, and out into the bright spring day. The library garden was a peaceful haven, a small enclosed space with winding paths, fragrant roses just beginning to bloom, and a majestic old oak tree at its center. As she pushed open the ornate iron gate, her gaze immediately flew to the oak. And there he was. A man stood beneath the ancient branches, his back partially turned to her. He was taller than she had imagined, with broad shoulders and dark, slightly tousled hair that caught the sunlight. He was dressed simply, in a tweed jacket and dark trousers. He held a book in his hand, his head slightly bowed, as if lost in thought. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, a drumbeat of pure adrenaline and emotion. Her legs felt both heavy and light. She took a deep breath, the scent of roses and damp earth filling her lungs. She started walking towards him, each step a deliberate act of courage, of faith. He heard her approach, or perhaps sensed her presence. Slowly, deliberately, he turned. Her gaze met his. Her gaze met his. His eyes, a shade of warm hazel, widened slightly, a flicker of surprise, then a dawning recognition passing through them. A gentle smile, hesitant at first, then more assured, touched his lips. It was a smile that held the warmth of 1,000 sunlit mornings, a quiet understanding, and a profound kindness that reached deep into Alara's soul. He was not a stranger. He was every whispered word, every shared thought, made real. He was even more handsome than she had dared to imagine, not in a grand, dramatic way, but with an understated charm that settled deep within her. His features were strong, yet softened by an air of thoughtfulness. A few faint lines fanned out from the corners of his eyes, suggesting a man who often smiled, or spent long hours contemplating the world. He had a slight dimple in his left cheek, visible only when his smile deepened. Alara felt a rush of heat to her cheeks, a shy awareness of her own vulnerability, yet she couldn't tear her eyes away. The book in her hands suddenly felt heavy, a shield and a key all at once. He took a step towards her, his gaze unwavering, full of a quiet reverence that made her breath catch. "Alara," he said, his voice a low, warm baritone that resonated with the same gentle strength she had found in his written words. It was even more beautiful spoken aloud. "You came." "Elias," she managed, her voice a little breathy, a little shaky. I did." A small, nervous laugh escaped her. "How could I not?" He returned her smile, a genuine, heartfelt expression that eased the last vestiges of her apprehension. "I confess," he said, his voice imbued with a touch of self-deprecating humor, "I wasn't entirely certain. It's a rather unconventional way to introduce oneself." He gestured vaguely between them, indicating their long, silent correspondence. "Perhaps," Alara conceded, a smile finally blooming fully on her face. "But it felt right, and your words, Elias, they were compelling." He chuckled softly, a rich, pleasant sound. "And yours, Alara, were a constant source of light in my days. I found myself looking forward to them with an eagerness I hadn't felt in years." He gestured to the empty space on the bench beneath the oak. Would you care to sit?" Alara nodded, her heart still thrumming, but now with a joyous rhythm. She walked towards the bench, and Elias moved with a quiet grace, allowing her to sit first before settling beside her. The air between them hummed with unspoken words, with the weight of all their shared secrets, now brought into the open. "I suppose," Alara began, turning the copy of One in a Secret Garden over in her hands, "you've been watching me for some time." There was no accusation in her voice, only a gentle curiosity. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant rose bushes, as if gathering his thoughts. "Longer than I care to admit, perhaps. I often visit the library. It's a sanctuary for me. And I couldn't help but notice you. Your quiet dedication, the way you spoke to the books as if they were old friends, the thoughtful expressions on your face as you read. You seemed content, yet also perhaps a little lonely, much like myself." He turned to her, his hazel eyes earnest. "I never meant to intrude, Alara, but there was something about you that simply drew me in. And then when I heard you hum that old Irish tune one quiet afternoon, the one my grandmother used to sing, I felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to reach out." Alara's eyes widened slightly. "The tune? She moved through the fair?" Elias nodded, a wistful smile playing on his lips. "Yes, it brought back a flood of memories, and I thought perhaps there was a kindred spirit in you, someone who appreciated the quiet beauty of the old world." He paused, his gaze searching hers. "I hope you don't find my methods too peculiar." "Peculiar, perhaps," Alara admitted, a soft blush returning. "But also, utterly enchanting. Your whispers, Elias, awakened something in me, a sense of anticipation, a hope I hadn't realized I was missing. And you, Alara, gave me courage," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I'm not always the most outgoing of individuals. Words have always been my preferred medium. But your responses, your openness, your own beautiful words, they emboldened me. They made me want to step out of the shadows, even just a little. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the spring breeze rustling the leaves of the oak tree above them. The air was filled with the scent of burgeoning life, of freshly turned earth and blooming flowers. It felt like the perfect backdrop for a beginning. "So," Alara finally ventured, a playful glint in her eyes, "what do you do, Elias, when you're not leaving cryptic notes in my favorite books?" He laughed, a genuine, unrestrained sound that made her own heart lighten. "I'm a cartographer, actually. I draw maps, not grand, adventurous maps of uncharted territories anymore, mostly for local historical societies and private collectors. But I still find immense joy in tracing the contours of the land, in revealing the stories held within its folds and lines. It's a quiet profession, much like yours, I imagine." "A cartographer," Alara mused. "A delightful surprise. That explains your fascination with ancient maps and your eye for detail. And your love for books, Alara," he continued, "explains your deep understanding of the human heart and your ability to find beauty in the most unexpected places." His gaze held hers, and in that moment, Alara felt a profound sense of being truly seen, truly appreciated, in a way she never had before. They spent the next hour talking, the words flowing easily between them, no longer confined to the pages of books. They spoke of favorite authors, shared childhood memories, dreams for the future. Elias confessed a particular fondness for old detective novels, while Alara admitted a secret love for cookbooks, despite her modest culinary skills. He described the meticulous process of creating a historical map, painstakingly researching old records, and surveying forgotten landmarks. She recounted the joy of helping a child discover their first truly captivating story, or guiding a lost soul to a book that offered solace. The sun climbed higher, casting dappled shadows through the oak leaves. Alara felt a lightness she hadn't known was possible, a deep contentment settling in her soul. Elias was everything his notes had hinted at and more: charming, intelligent, gentle, and possessed of a quiet strength that felt profoundly reassuring. "I must confess," Elias said, his eyes twinkling, "I've been dying to ask you something since you replied to my first note, about Wuthering Heights." Alara smiled, leaning forward slightly. "Oh, do tell. You said your heart found solace in gentle love stories, like a river carving its path through stone. Have you ever read Persuasion by Jane Austen?" Alara's eyes lit up. "It's one of my absolute favorites. Anne Elliot and Captain Wentworth. A love that endures, that grows stronger with time and adversity. It's truly beautiful." Elias's smile widened. "I thought so. It always struck me as the epitome of quiet strength. A love that, given a second chance, is even more profound because of the lessons learned along the way." His gaze held hers, and Alara felt the unspoken depth of his words. He wasn't just talking about the book anymore. A comfortable silence fell between them once more, but this time, it was different. It was the silence of two people who had found a deep resonance with each other, who understood without needing to articulate every thought. "Alara," Elias said softly, breaking the quiet. "Thank you for coming, for trusting me, for giving me this chance." "Thank you, Elias," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "For the whispers, for the notes, for reminding me that sometimes the greatest stories are the ones we live ourselves." He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment, then gently took hers. His touch was warm, comforting, and sent a shiver of pure delight through her. His thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. "I would very much like to continue this story, Alara," he said, his hazel eyes serious, yet full of a hopeful tenderness. "Perhaps over a cup of tea, somewhere less public next time?" Alara's smile was radiant. "I would like that very much, Elias." She squeezed his hand gently. "Very much indeed." The bell of the library chimed softly in the distance, a gentle reminder of her duties. She knew she needed to return, but she felt no rush. This moment, this connection, was far more important. As they slowly rose from the bench, their hands still linked, Alara looked up at the ancient oak tree, its leaves rustling softly as if whispering their approval. The world, once a comfortable but predictable place, now shimmered with possibility. The story that had begun with whispers had found its voice, And Alara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her heart, that this was only the first chapter of a beautiful, unfolding tale. Their hands remained clasped as they walked, a silent agreement passing between them. The twilight softened the edges of the familiar street, painting the houses in shades of lavender and gray. Alara felt a lightness in her step she hadn't known before, as if her feet barely touched the ground. The world indeed shimmered. "I should walk you home," Callum said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her palm. It wasn't a question, but a gentle assertion, a desire to prolong the magic of the moment. Alara nodded, unable to articulate the sudden rush of happiness. Her usual shyness, a familiar cloak she wore, had momentarily slipped away, replaced by an exhilarating sense of being seen, truly seen. As they strolled, the silence between them was not empty, but full, pregnant with unspoken promises and the quiet hum of anticipation. She noticed the way his thumb gently stroked the back of her hand, a small gesture that sent warmth spreading through her veins. He didn't rush her, didn't press for words. He simply was. When they reached her doorstep, framed by a climbing rosebush heavy with fragrant blooms, the thought of saying goodnight felt like a wrench. I had a wonderful time, Callum," Alara managed, her voice a little breathy. A slow smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "So did I, Alara. More wonderful than I could have imagined." He paused, his gaze searching hers. Would you like to continue our story? Perhaps over dinner sometime this week." Her heart fluttered. "I'd like that very much." "Good," he said, his smile widening. "How about Thursday? The Whispering Willow Bistro? I hear they have excellent quiet corners." Alara chuckled softly. The Whispering Willow. It sounds perfect. The name itself felt like an omen, a continuation of their theme. He released her hand then, but only to cup her cheek, his touch gentle and warm. For a fleeting moment, she thought he might kiss her, and a thrill, both terrifying and exciting, shot through her. Instead, he simply looked at her, his eyes full of a quiet reverence that made her feel beautiful. "Good night, Alara," he whispered, his voice a soft caress. "Good night, Callum," she whispered back, her voice barely audible. He turned and walked away, not looking back until he reached the bend in the road. There, he glanced over his shoulder, offering her one last smile before disappearing into the deepening night. Alara stood on her porch, a lingering warmth on her cheek, her heart soaring. She felt like a character stepping into a new, captivating chapter, the pages still crisp and waiting to be turned. The next few days were a blur of anticipation. Alara found herself humming as she shelved books at the library, her mind replaying every detail of their meeting under the ancient oak. Her colleagues, usually used to her quiet demeanor, noticed a new sparkle in her eyes, a lightness in her step. Even Mrs. Henderson, the notoriously observant head librarian, gave her a knowing glance. Thursday evening arrived, bringing with it a fresh wave of nerves and excitement. Alara chose a dress the color of twilight skies, a soft blue that she felt echoed the serenity Callum brought to her. When he arrived, precisely on time, his eyes lit up as he saw her. "You look stunning, Alara," he said, his voice sincere, making her blush. He offered her his arm, and they walked the short distance to the Whispering Willow Bistro. The bistro lived up to its name. Soft lighting, the gentle murmur of conversation, and the subtle scent of herbs and roasted vegetables created an intimate atmosphere. They were seated in a cozy alcove, tucked away from the main dining room, feeling as if they had their own private world. Over succulent roasted chicken and a shared plate of creamy risotto, they talked. Really talked. Alara found it surprisingly easy to open up to Callum. He asked thoughtful questions and, more importantly, he listened. He told her about his work as a furniture restorer, his passion for bringing old pieces back to life, honoring their history while giving them new purpose. "Every scratch, every worn patch, tells a story," he explained, his eyes alight. "Just like people, I suppose." "I never thought of it that way," Alara mused. "But you're right. Books, too. They carry so many stories within them, not just the words on the page, but the lives of those who read them, the journeys they've taken. They discovered shared loves for long walks, old movies, and the quiet satisfaction of a perfectly brewed cup of tea. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, weaving through anecdotes and observations, revealing layers of personality that Alara had kept hidden for so long. With Callum, her whispers weren't just audible, they were encouraged. Their dates continued, each one deepening their connection. They explored the town's charming antique shops, Alara finding joy in Callum's expertise as he pointed out the craftsmanship of different eras. They picnicked by the river, sharing sandwiches and dreams under a sky painted with fluffy clouds. He even visited her at the library one afternoon, not to check out a book, but just to bring her a warm tea and a smile, making her feel cherished. One evening, after a particularly delightful evening of stargazing from Callum's backyard, Alara found herself sharing a deeper fear. "I've always been afraid of being unremarkable," she admitted, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "Just another quiet librarian, blending into the background. It's why I retreated so much." Callum turned to her, his hand gently covering hers where it rested on the cool grass. "Alara," he said, his voice firm but tender. "You are anything but unremarkable. You have a quiet strength, a profound depth. You see beauty in stories and history, and you carry a light within you that's brighter than any star I've ever seen. You just needed someone to help you see it too." His words, spoken with such conviction, brought a prickle of tears to her eyes. He didn't try to dismiss her feelings, but acknowledged them, and then offered a different perspective, a gentler truth. It was in moments like these that Alara understood the true depth of his kindness, and her heart swelled with a feeling she was only just beginning to name. Their journey wasn't entirely without its gentle ripples. One afternoon, they had planned to visit a new art exhibition. Alara, lost in a particularly compelling novel, misread the time on the ticket. When Callum arrived at her doorstep, ready to go, she was still halfway through her tea, oblivious. "Oh, Callum, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, her face flushing with embarrassment. "I thought it was an hour later. I must have been completely lost in my book." A flicker of disappointment crossed his face, but it quickly softened. "No worries," he said, though she could tell he truly wanted to see the exhibit. "We can still make it if we hurry, but we'd have to rush." Alara looked at him, surprised by his easygoing nature. She expected frustration, perhaps a slight annoyance. Instead, he offered an alternative, prioritizing their time together over a set plan. "Ice cream sounds like a much better plan," she said. As they walked hand in hand towards the local parlor, Alara squeezed his hand. "Thank you for being so understanding," she murmured. He smiled. "Life's too short to get upset over small things, Alara, especially when there's ice cream involved. Besides," he added, his gaze tender, "I'd rather spend an unhurried afternoon with you, doing anything, than rush through something just to say we did it." It was a small incident, but it spoke volumes. It wasn't just his patience, but his genuine desire for shared joy, his ability to adapt and find happiness in the unexpected. Alara felt her trust in him deepen, knotting itself securely around the fragile threads of her heart. With Callum, she was learning that even the quietest moments could hold the loudest declarations of love. Weeks turned into months, each passing day weaving their lives more intricately together. Alara found her world expanding, not just through Callum's presence but through the courage he instilled in her. She began to speak up more in staff meetings, suggesting new programming ideas for the library, ideas that had long lingered as whispers in her mind. Her colleagues noticed the change, remarking on her newfound confidence, and Alara often found herself attributing it, silently, to Callum. Callum, in turn, often found solace in the quiet corners of the library, sketching designs for his furniture restoration projects, occasionally looking up to catch Alara's eye over a stack of books, a shared smile passing between them that needed no words. He introduced her to his small circle of friends, artisans and craftsmen like himself, who welcomed her with warmth and genuine curiosity. Alara, usually daunted by social gatherings, found herself enjoying their company, drawn into lively discussions about art, history, and the beauty of creation. One chilly autumn evening, as leaves painted the town in hues of fiery red and gold, they sat by a crackling fire in Callum's cozy living room, mugs of spiced cider warming their hands. Alara had just finished telling him about a particularly difficult day at the library, dealing with a demanding patron and a sudden computer glitch. She had never been one to complain, but with Callum, the words flowed easily. "It's strange," she confessed, looking into the dancing flames. "For so long, I thought my quietness was a shield, that it protected me from, well, from everything, from being hurt, from being misunderstood." She took a deep breath. "But it also kept me from truly living, from truly connecting." Callum reached out, taking her hand and threading his fingers through hers. "It's understandable, Alara. We all build walls for different reasons. But true strength isn't in never getting hurt. It's in daring to be vulnerable, in choosing to open up even when it's scary." He paused, his gaze softening. "You know, when I was younger, I used to be incredibly shy too. I felt like my words never came out right, so I just stopped trying. I found my voice, in a way, through my hands, through restoring furniture. It was a silent language. But it wasn't enough." He squeezed her hand gently. "Meeting you, it's like you've taught me how to speak again, how to truly listen, not just to words, but to the whispers of a heart." His confession resonated deeply with Alara. To hear that he, so outwardly confident and warm, had also struggled with shyness, made her feel less alone, more understood. It wasn't just her he was helping, they were helping each other. They were two quiet souls who had found their collective voice. Later that week, a significant opportunity arose at the library. The local historical society was looking for someone to curate a special exhibition on the town's literary heritage, a project that required extensive research, public speaking, and collaboration with various community groups. Mrs. Henderson, knowing Alara's passion for local history and her meticulous research skills, approached her. "Alara," Mrs. Henderson began, "this is a demanding role, but I believe you have the perfect blend of knowledge and dedication. However, it will require you to step out of your comfort zone. There will be presentations, meetings with donors, and a public opening speech." Alara's heart pounded. This was exactly the kind of project she had always dreamed of, but the public-facing aspects filled her with dread. The old Alara would have politely declined, retreating to the safety of her familiar routines. But the new Alara, the one blossoming under Callum's unwavering belief, felt a surge of something she recognized as courage. That evening, she recounted the offer to Callum, her voice laced with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "It's everything I've ever wanted to do, Callum," she admitted, pacing his living room. "But the thought of speaking in front of people, my voice just disappears. It becomes a whisper. And then, nothing." Callum rose from his armchair, his expression calm and reassuring. He walked over to her, taking her hands in his. "Alara, your voice is beautiful, whether it's a whisper or a roar, and it has important things to say. This project, it's your story waiting to be told. The stories of this town, woven through its literature. Who better to tell them than you, a keeper of stories?" He looked into her eyes, his gaze steady. "I know it's daunting, but I also know your strength. And I'll be there, in the front row, whispering my encouragement if you need me to. You won't be alone." His unwavering belief was a balm to her fears. It wasn't just words. It was a promise, a foundation upon which she could build her confidence. That night, Alara made a decision. She would accept the challenge. She would find her voice, not just for herself, but for the stories that deserve to be heard. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity for Alara. She plunged into the Historical Society project with a dedication that surprised even herself. She spent countless hours poring over old manuscripts, dusty archives, and forgotten letters, uncovering fascinating narratives about the town's literary figures. Her passion for the subject fueled her, and she found a quiet joy in bringing these forgotten voices back to life. The biggest challenge, however, remained the public speaking. She practiced her presentations in front of Callum, her voice initially hesitant, wavering. He would sit patiently, offering gentle suggestions, reminding her to breathe, to trust her knowledge, and most importantly, to speak from the heart. "Imagine you're just telling me a story," he'd say, his eyes warm. "Because that's what you're doing, Alara. You're sharing something beautiful." He even helped her create visual aids, crafting elegant display cases for artifacts and designing informative panels for the exhibition, blending his artistic eye with her meticulous research. Their collaboration was seamless, a beautiful dance of shared purpose and mutual support. The night of the exhibition opening arrived, a crisp spring evening. The library's main hall, usually a quiet sanctuary, buzzed with an excited crowd, townspeople, local dignitaries, members of the Historical Society, and a smattering of curious visitors. Elara, dressed in a soft emerald green dress that complemented her eyes, felt a familiar tremor of nerves. Her palms were damp, her throat dry. Callum stood beside her, a steady presence, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. "You've got this," he whispered, his voice a warm anchor in the sea of her anxiety. "Just breathe, and remember, I'm here." Mrs. Henderson introduced her, her voice full of pride. Elara walked to the podium, her heart hammering against her ribs. The sea of faces blurred into an intimidating mass. She gripped the edges of the lectern, took a deep, shaky breath, and looked out at the crowd. Her gaze found Callum's, and in his reassuring smile, she found a flicker of strength. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice a little thin at first. She paused, took another breath, and consciously slowed her pace. "Welcome to Echoes of Ink, our town's literary heritage. For many years, I've walked these halls surrounded by the whispers of stories. Tonight, we give those whispers a voice." As she spoke, something shifted. Her passion for the subject took over. She spoke of the forgotten poetess who penned verses under the ancient oak, of the spirited journalist who dared to challenge the status quo, of the quiet scholar whose vast collection now enriched the library. Her voice, initially hesitant, grew stronger, clearer, imbued with the conviction of someone sharing something deeply cherished. She spoke not just of facts, but of the human stories behind them, the dreams, the struggles, the triumphs. She looked up halfway through her speech and saw faces rapt with attention, leaning forward, genuinely captivated. She saw Mrs. Henderson beaming, and in the front row, Callum's eyes, reflecting not just pride, but a profound understanding. He was not just seeing her speak, he was seeing her truly come alive. When she finished, there was a beat of silence, and then a wave of applause, warm and resounding. People flocked to her, congratulating her, praising her insights and her eloquent delivery. Elara felt a rush of exhilaration, a sensation she had never truly experienced before. It wasn't just relief. It was a deep, satisfying sense of accomplishment, of having truly found her voice. Later, as the crowd began to thin, Callum approached her, his eyes shining. "You are magnificent, Elara," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "Absolutely magnificent. You didn't just speak, you wove a spell." She leaned into him, feeling the solid comfort of his presence. "I couldn't have done it without you, Callum," she whispered, her voice still a little hoarse from speaking, but now filled with a quiet confidence. "You helped me find my voice." He kissed the top of her head. "No, Elara, your voice was always there. I just helped you remember you had the courage to use it." That night, as they walked home under a sky dusted with stars, Elara felt a profound sense of peace. The exhibition was a triumph, but more importantly, it was a testament to her own growth, a journey from silent whispers to articulate expression. And Callum had been there every step of the way, not pushing, but gently guiding, always believing. Their relationship, too, had reached a new depth. They had navigated challenges, celebrated successes, and shared their deepest vulnerabilities. Their love wasn't a sudden explosion, but a slow, tender bloom, like the ancient oak, its roots growing deeper and stronger with each passing season. One quiet Sunday afternoon, several months after the exhibition, they found themselves back at the ancient oak, their special place. Its leaves were now a vibrant summer green, rustling with the familiar, comforting whispers. They sat on their bench, hands clasped, just as they had that first day. "You know," Callum said, breaking the comfortable silence, "this tree, it feels like it's watched over us from the very beginning, from those first whispers." Elara smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "It does. It feels like a silent witness to our story." He turned to her then, his eyes serious and tender. "Elara," he began, his voice soft, "I found my truest story with you. My home isn't a place, it's wherever you are. And I want to spend every chapter, every paragraph, every whispered secret with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a simple silver ring engraved with delicate leaf patterns, reminiscent of the oak's foliage. Elara, my love, will you marry me? Will you write the rest of our beautiful unfolding tale with me? Tears welled in Elara's eyes, hot and joyful. Her heart swelled with a love so profound it stole her breath. This wasn't just a proposal. It was a culmination of everything they had built. Every shared whisper, every moment of vulnerability, every quiet strength. Yes, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, 1,000 times yes, Callum. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and then pulled her into a tender, heartfelt kiss, a promise of forever. The ancient oak rustled its leaves, as if applauding, its whispers carrying on the breeze, weaving their love story into the very fabric of the town. Years later, the ancient oak still stood, a sentinel of enduring love, its branches reaching towards the sky. Below it, on a bench now weathered and softened by time, sat Elara and Callum, their hands still linked, their eyes holding the quiet wisdom of a shared lifetime. Their life together was a tapestry woven with threads of quiet joy, shared laughter, and unwavering support. Their home, a charming cottage with a flourishing garden, was filled with the scent of old books and freshly polished wood, a testament to their individual passions and their shared love. Callum's restoration business thrived, and Elara, now the cherished head librarian, had not only continued to curate successful exhibitions, but had also started a popular storytelling hour for children, her voice, once a whisper, now a confident, melodic instrument. They had learned that love wasn't always grand declarations, but often found in the small everyday moments, Callum bringing Elara a steaming mug of tea as she lost herself in a book, Elara leaving a carefully pressed flower from the garden on Callum's workbench, the comfortable silences they shared, knowing that they didn't need words to understand each other. Their love was like the ancient oak, deeply rooted, resilient, growing stronger and more beautiful with each passing season. It had weathered gentle storms and basked in golden sunshine. It had started with whispers with tentative glances, and had blossomed into a profound connection that transcended words. Elara leaned her head on Callum's shoulder, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence. "Do you remember that first day?" she murmured, her voice soft with contentment. "Under this very tree? I never imagined my life could be this." Callum squeezed her hand. "I did," he replied, his voice a low rumble. "I saw it then, Elara. The story waiting to unfold. I just knew I wanted to be in it with you." The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. The air grew cooler, carrying the sweet scent of honeysuckle. Elara looked at the ancient oak, its leaves rustling in the evening breeze, and then at Callum, his profile etched against the fading light. Her story, their story, wasn't just a collection of events. It was a testament to the power of connection, of finding your voice with the one who truly listens, and of building a life where even the quietest whispers could speak volumes of love. It was a story of two hearts, once navigating the world alone, now intertwined, forever writing new, beautiful chapters together under the watchful, whispering branches of their ancient beloved tree. And as the stars began to prickle through the deepening twilight, Elara knew, with a certainty that hummed deep in her soul, that their tale was indeed an endless, heartwarming symphony